Hi, my name is Sean Lewitz, and I'm on a journey to tell meaningful stories beautifully. And you're listening to the Unfreaking Believable podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Unfreaking Believable. We invite you to pull up a chair, relax, and join in for the next 40 minutes or so as we bring you guests who will share with you the moments that have made a difference in their lives. And it's all because of that one inciting incident. We believe that life is infinitely stranger than fiction, stranger than anything the mind can invent. You might even say it's unfreaking believable. Welcome to the podcast. We're your hosts, and I'm Jenny.
I'm Jen.
I'm Betsy. Ladies, nice to be together again. How is everybody today?
Just ducky, thank you. Thank you. I feel like I've been seeing you guys a lot more lately, which is awesome.
Yeah, we definitely have been doing a lot of recordings.
Agreed. It's good to get ahead of the game a little bit.
It is. Bank those bad boys up.
Exactly.
And Jen, you've been doing a lot of packing, so we've only seen you in the professional sense lately. You've been boxing and taping and
dusting.
I'm having flashbacks because I just did all that.
Yes, you did. Don't send that mojo over here. I want to stay where I am for a while.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Agreed. Well, Jen, do you have a word of the day?
I do, and I think it's a very appropriate one since our guest is from places distant today. So our word of the day is cottywomple.
Cottywomple?
Okay,
It's a fun
cottywomple.
one
That
to
sounds
say.
British.
I'm sure it is. And it basically means to travel purposefully toward an as yet unknown destination with a sense of adventure and exploration. And you're focused on the journey rather than the destination.
I like that.
I'm going to have to get that one tattooed. I like that.
Yeah. So I feel like we all could use a little more cottywompling in our lives.
Cottywompeling.
Agreed.
How about some fun facts, Jenny? You got some?
Yes, I do. All right. First fun fact. We are breathing the same air as dinosaurs once did. And the reason is because the molecules in the atmosphere get reused constantly. So there's a good chance that at least one of the breaths you took today have contained atoms that passed through a dinosaur's lungs.
Amazing.
Oh, I hope it was a stegosaurus.
Can't be sorry.
My next fun fact is the Colosseum in Rome was inaugurated in 80 AD, while parts of the Great Wall of China were already over 300 years old. And the last major work on the wall wouldn't happen until the 1600s, which would be about 1,500 years after the Colosseum.
Yeah, you always blow my mind with those time-related.
I love those timeline fun facts. I know we all do.
Blows my mind.
Yep.
There are so many facts sort of around the Great Wall of China, too. It's like a treasure trove of fun facts, I think.
Sure. It really is. All right, last quick little fun fact. When the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock in 1620, Shakespeare had already been dead for 4 years. He died in 1616, rather.
Actually, I did know that one. And I write that off to 30 years as an English teacher.
Right on.
I figured you would know that one.
Yeah, having taught both British and American Lit, that one I actually did know. So,
Awesome.
But can I add a fun fact to your fun fact?
Please.
So it's not known exactly when Shakespeare was born, like what day, because they didn't keep those kind of records. But it is believed widely that he died on his 54th birthday.
Oh. That's sad.
That
Yeah.
is.
It's on their birthday.
But it also makes Betsy and I older than Shakespeare.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Not to call us out or anything, but I think it's an accomplishment.
Yeah. I thought we were friends.
Maybe not after that. Sorry.
Oh, my
Boggle the mind.
goodness.
All right. Are we ready to get rolling?
Yeah, let's do this.
Okay, on this episode, our guest is Sean Lutz. He is on a mission to build a vibrant community of like-minded creators. A former afternoon drive time radio host on Cape Town Station, Sean has graced stages, emceed major music festivals, and hosted events during the 2010 World Cup. With hundreds of interviews behind him, he now leads workshops and industry events that bring creators of all abilities together. Through his podcast consultancy, Sean empowers both South African and international clients to tell meaningful stories with clarity and impact. He's also the voice behind the award-winning South African podcast, Something Shifted, a recent Apple Podcast Editor's Choice.
Sean, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here, all the way from, well, not quite so sunny South Africa, but nonetheless, it's a wonderful place to be. You guys should come and visit me.
I have some family history in that area. I have an ancestor who was an astronomer in Bloemfontein.
Oh,
Yes,
Did I say that right?
but we'll give it to you. Yeah,
Okay.
I understand what you're talking about. Yes, and 100%. And it's a beautiful place to be, especially to look at things like the stars and to
Yes,
study astronomy.
yes.
Yeah,
The City of Roses.
that's correct. Yes.
ah.
I've done a lot of traveling, but I have not yet set foot on your continent. So you're up next, and I definitely I have some sort of lifetime bucket list items that would definitely fall into South Africa's province.
Well, we most
So-
certainly need to add some facts and some fun facts then to your ever-growing list, maybe, by getting you into South Africa, maybe one of the only regions that grows a particular plant called fynbos. It's the only place you can find it in the entire world.
Oh,
We also make a particular tea called rooibos tea, and I don't know whether you're
Oh, love
drinking
rooibos
tea at all.
Yeah.
But rooibos tea is the only place you can find it. So yeah, some fun facts to add to the rolling list that we've got going today.
yes, we love additional fun facts. I tell you, one of my dream locations too, in Africa itself would be, I've always wanted to go to Egypt and see the pyramids.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, that's another bucket list item. Pretty far
Exactly.
north of where you are, but yeah. So you get my shark cage diving
Oh, no.
dreams.
No,
Oh,
no,
no way. Hard no.
no. No.
Yeah, I
Never,
mean,
never.
I'll take you, but I'm not getting in the water with you.
That's
Sorry for
no.
that.
Fair. That's fair.
No,
No, that's
no.
that's Florida girl talking.
I don't live
So-
inland because sharks can't get me here.
Yeah, I don't even want to be out in a boat in South Africa.
I'm phobic. I mean, phobic, but I cannot stop watching Shark Week. So,
'cause it's
you know,
best.
It's
it's one of
addictive.
those things. It's like my morbid curiosity
Yeah.
gets the better of me, and I can't not.
I think the more we know about the beautiful creatures, the better it is for us and for them. I'm
Yeah.
very
Mhm.
much in the belief that that's their home, the ocean.
It
They can
is.
have it. I've got
Exactly.
lots of land to explore. Thank
Yes.
you very
They
much.
stay out of Arkansas. I'll stay out of the ocean.
And even though Cape Town is the great white shark capital, up here in New England, we're coming pretty close to it now. We've had such explosions of a seal population up here, and there is constantly great white sharks up here now. So I don't
Yeah.
go in the ocean anymore. I can't believe I went diving up here. You can't even see more than 5 feet in front of you in the Atlantic Ocean.
No seals in Arkansas.
Yeah. All right. All right, Sean, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Wow, what an opportunity. Thank you very much again for having me. I suppose there's so much to tell, and how do you share a lifetime in a byline, right? But I think, you summed it up really well. I spent a fair amount of time working on radio in the media, but interestingly enough, at least I find it interesting still, prior to that, I used to coach kids to swim. So we've just gone from the water, to the radio and back to the water again. So making sure that children were comfortable with being in the water and they could gain their confidence in doing so. And I worked in that space for a very long time, being able to coach and mentor young minds and guide them a little bit. And there's nothing quite like a fit, healthy body and a strong mind, to will you through. And then I spent a fair amount of time, like I said, working in radio. That transition was very interesting. Coincidentally, I spent a little bit of time at a summer swim camp in Alabama. Specifically at Auburn University,
That's
which
pretty
is where
good.
this,
That's pretty good.
thank you, which is where this weird little twang in my voice comes from, this accent. I haven't really been able to shake it. Still, South Africans, I'll walk into a store and many of them say to me, where are you from? How long are you visiting for? I have to remind them that I know this place better than they do. So that's quite fun. So my trip to the US started with me wanting to explore using my voice to tell stories. And initially it was just this interest in trying to do a voiceover for a documentary. Growing up in South Africa, you've already mentioned some of the wildlife. So I wanted to lend my voice to wildlife documentaries. I thought I could be, Sir David Attenborough in some context, in some way.
What a great dream.
Or maybe I could be, an animated character, something like that. And at the time, I just couldn't find any way to get into the industry here in South Africa. And Google and the internet was my friend. I found a location in New York. So I cut my very first voiceover demo in New York City. I thought it was the bee's knees. But working in podcasting, if you've got headphones on and you're taking instructions and you're in a different country, for me, I was learning the inflections and how to, use my voice to tell stories with somebody talking directly into my ears, into my head, into my brain. And then I went into a summer swim camp. So the accent has kind of just stuck. I don't think you probably wouldn't necessarily notice it, but South Africans, they still hear a rolling of the R's and so forth. So
I was going to say your R's are definitely, they have a little bit of that.
there's a
deep
twang
south.
there, isn't there? There's a
little,
something. There's a little
little.
something. So if I spend a fair amount of time with people that have got a completely different accent to me, I tend to pick it up. So please don't feel like I'm mimicking or mocking. I really try hard not to do it. But by the end of this call, I might very well sound like one of y'all and not like I'm from here.
Yeah, because you've got 3 different regions.
I do that too. I pick up on accents. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I totally can sympathize with that because I lived in the UK for a while, and I had to consciously not adopt a Sussex accent because after about a month of being there, I was just, that's all I was hearing. So I totally can appreciate that. And what what in your history led you into a desire to do voice work, aside from the fact that you obviously have a terrific voice?
Well, thank you very much. I think I've worked on it quite a lot, but I appreciate that. I think prior to even coaching swimming, I spent a fair amount of time on stage. The very first time that I remember holding an audience's attention, I was probably in grade 3, maybe grade 2, grade 3, around there, around 8 or 9 years old. And somehow my English teacher had decided that I need to do a poetry I Stedford, which basically meant, getting up in front of a group of people and being able to do this for marks, for some kind of an assessment. And I delivered that poem to the point where I got the highest honors on the day for my age group, walked away with a gold certificate. And the next thing, the school decided to put me in the lead character of the school production for the entire, the entire school. And I guess it just it felt like something that I could do, and I just lent into it. I took up dance classes soon thereafter. It was around the late 1990s, early 1990s. Skis, sorry, I say skis, Afrikaans, excuse me. And that was around Dirty Dancing, came out late 1980s, I think. I saw that movie, and all I wanted to do was shimmy and shake.
1986.
There we go. So I got into modern dancing at the time. So I suppose there were a few things that sort of culminated in me being on stage quite a lot. And then, when you've got a group of peers and the school knows that the others won't, but you will, you often get pushed to the front of the group, right? So whether it was me looking, I never feel like I was looking for attention or wanted the spotlight. I just felt very comfortable on a stage or in front of a group of people. And from there, it snowballed, I suppose. And then when I was in high school, I remember being asked to MC an event for the school, and I was behind stage the entire time. So you just heard my voice over the microphone. And it was part of a week-long festival of activities. And this was sort of a fashion show, pageant sort of thing that I was MCing. And at the end of the event, I had to come out and present, the winners, who they might be, having received the cards from the judges. And there was a delay. As with so many of these things, the judges just cannot make up their minds. So now I was in front of everybody, and somehow I pulled information from all of the research and the preparation I had done. And I stood on stage probably for about 10 minutes, just holding their attention, not necessarily making jokes, but to the point where, again, the entire school looked at me very differently thereafter. So I guess it was from that just the ability to be on stage and hold an audience. And then I just didn't really know what to do with it. I went into coaching swimming, but all the while feeling like I needed to use my voice for something, which led me to doing voiceover. And then that in turn led to working on radio, and I had a very good career in radio for nearly 20 years. So I'm not complaining. It all worked out really well for me.
Yeah, having worked in radio myself, that it's hard to make a good career out of radio. I worked for a country music station, and my main job was to they would send me CDs from all the music stars, and I would do reviews of them. And then if they came to town in concert, then I would go to the concert, get backstage passes, and I would do interviews with them while they were in town, and then write articles for the magazine. So my voice wasn't on the radio, but I was working in the background, and so that's very hard to make any kind of money. All I got paid was CDs and concert tickets. And occasionally swag. But yeah, definitely hard to make a career in radio. So how did you transition into podcasting? What was the draw there?
Well, I guess that kind of ties back to my story, but the podcasting came about where I started to feel like I was generating content on the fly all the time. In From about 2011 to 2018, I was hosting the afternoon drive show, and you would know that that show is constantly moving. So with every segment, you're probably talking about something different. You might have conducted an interview, but if you get to this beyond surface level, you've done really well in the time allotment that you have, sort of 90 seconds to 3 minutes. So, there's a lot of time pressure sticking to news and markers and advertising. And it was a commercial radio station too, which meant we're playing, what would you call it? Sort of like, now I'm trying to think of the anagram again, but basically hit radio, CHR, no, I can't remember now, hit contemporary sort of stuff. And around 2015, I just had this pull to be doing longer form content. 2014, 2015, I just wanted to do more stories, more in-depth, more getting to know people and being able to share. And in that time period, I purchased a bunch of equipment, which ultimately just lay in my house because I didn't quite know what to do with it. And I just had this idea to tell longer stories. And I guess from there, it was just that want to do a little bit more in-depth than surface level commercial churn. Constantly a celebrity story, constantly a new thing, but you never really get to the heart of it. Yeah, I would say that was probably the impetus, the push to drive to do a bit more.
I could totally understand that too, because I am always a fan of a long form interview if the guest is, interesting and has a
Mm.
story to tell, and if the interviewer knows how to draw that story out of someone. And I think it's a shame that so many people don't have a patience for long form interviews anymore. And I think you're absolutely hitting it right in that the sort of the advent of podcasting
Mm.
has really created a marketplace for that, where perhaps that had been missing at
Yeah.
some point.
I also think, now that you're making me reflect a bit, I remember watching interviews by people like Michael Parkinson from the UK, who would literally, it's just two talking heads, as we would refer to them now. But that was a television show, and he would be able to draw such great stories out of his guests. I think a lot of us are familiar with the likes of Oprah Winfrey's work. And yes, on a daytime talk show, obviously a little bit more of a high frequency turnover, but there were some really compelling interviews that she had done in her career. Obviously, we're all very familiar with a lot of her work. And that was obviously also part of my upbringing and my understanding of how the world comes together. And you're quite right. There was something about being able to delve a bit deeper into somebody's story, knowing their background, understanding what makes them tick, and hopefully seeing where they're planning to go in the future. And with a commercial afternoon drive radio show, as much as there was a lot of attention on us, there just wasn't the scope to be able to explore those avenues because you're being constrained to the advertising or the higher ups or whatever the constraints may have been or were at the time. And podcasting really has given each of us an opportunity to turn into a bit of a media company, I suppose, and explore whatever it is that interests you, and hopefully showcase that in a way that other people's look at it and listen to it as well and find the same interest that you're trying to create. And hence why I say I'm doing my level best to tell meaningful stories and hopefully do it in a beautiful way that pays tribute to the person whose story it actually is, with my
That's one of the
podcast.
things I was interested in about your podcast because it seems a lot like ours,
Mm.
because that's the driving force behind ours. We want to delve deeper into people and pull out those unfreaking believable stories.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I also saw a bit of a synergy there. And the way I try and put my show together is effectively I start with what I'm calling life quakes. And I think as I say that, you're probably going, oh, I know what that is. You can imagine what that might look like for somebody. And I ask each of my guests to sort of explain to me what comes to mind if they were to open a book or open the dictionary and find the word lifequake, what do they think the description would be? Which really frames it for them. And then we have a conversation starting at whatever that thing was. And it differs from one person to the next. I've had interviews with people that gave birth to their very first son and decided 2 weeks later that they needed to be an Olympic athlete. And that was the catalyst to becoming that. I've spoken to others that had their father in their arms when he passed away at the age of 13, and how that led to abandonment issues and so many other things. So, the stories vary, but we start there, and then we try and find what that is and how that's affected them and how they see the world now. And the way I structure the show as well is I conduct the interview, but then I remove myself from the entire interview, and I go back and narrate the bits and pieces that they've maybe given me either off mic or I've read or we've pieced together, so that I'm telling mostly their story. You hear my voice, back to the narration and being able to do documentaries. You'll hear my voice through the story, and I try and color it in as best as possible so that there's empathy and emotion more so than just a back and forth conversation. So the show is also structured in a way that hopefully tells a story as best as possible.
And you know what? I think this sounds like the perfect time for us to hand the microphone over to you, because I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear why we brought you on the show, and that is to share your unfreaking believable story. So, Sean, the microphone is all yours.
Thank you very much. It was 2016, and my baby girl was due to be born. And in January of that year, we were expecting her nice and early. She was 3 weeks late. And as we got closer and closer to the birth date, obviously our anticipation heightened. There was some complications in the birth. And when she was born, she was rushed off to ICU, a neonatal unit of ICU. She weighed within her weight range. She was a really nice big baby. So she really didn't belong in a neonatal unit. But nonetheless, there she was, this giant of a child amongst what some might say the size of a block of butter in South Africa anyway. And it turned out that she'd taken in fluid, and we weren't sure whether she was breathing or not at the time, right? It turned out she'd taken in fluid. But that then meant that we had a very careful eye on her thereafter. And 6 months after she was born, I had come home from doing my radio show, and we were going through the regular routine of bathing and getting her ready for a bed, as all parents would. Had her up on the change table and going through that coochie-coo routine, as we always did, interacting. And I said to my wife, she's not moving. So Zoe had suddenly just stopped interacting with all my, interactions. And then slowly but surely, she started to turn blue, and we panicked, as I think most parents would. First time, never seen anything like this. We'd known that she suffered with reflux and so forth, so my immediate reaction was to think that she'd had some reflux and she was just struggling to breathe. But we went into flat-out panic. Thankfully, my swimming coaching days kicked in, and I immediately performed CPR. We had the hospital on the phone. We rushed her to the ER, and by the time I got into the ER, she was screaming. So clearly, she was breathing again. And I started to wonder whether we had panicked for no reason, or was there something else at play here? The doctor then decided that we should probably monitor Zoe overnight. And because this particular hospital didn't have a pediatric ICU, that meant putting her in an ambulance and taking her to a different hospital. So I was in my car behind the ambulance. It was winter, so it was raining and it was very dark. My wife and my daughter were in the ambulance ahead of me, and they turned right, and I had to turn left and go home to look after the dogs. And I remember breaking down then for the first time, bawling my eyes out, trying to get home. And I remember walking into the house, and it felt like a place that I didn't belong. It really looked like a life that had been interrupted. There were clothes and water in the bath, clothes lying away, and I couldn't even enter Zoe's room or switch the light off, because it kind of felt like if I did that, it's sort of an acknowledgement of the fact that she wasn't there. Nonetheless, we slept, in inverted commas, that night, together with my dogs on my bed. And very early the next morning, I went off to the hospital to go and see my family. And in walking into this ward, the doctor was there with my wife, Rwanda, and with Zoe. And she took one look at me and she said, "Dad, if you hadn't breathed for your child last night, she wouldn't be here today." I broke down again, as you can well imagine. And that then led into a cascade of things as we tried to figure out what had happened. So we stayed in that hospital for about 4 days, and it got to the weekend, and they said to us, she seems fine. You can take her home. We can monitor from home. And my wife and I just had this gut feeling. We said, we're not quite ready yet. We just want to stay here for it, over the weekend, please. And we'll come in. We stayed with her overnight. We would go home taking turns. We came in on the Monday morning, and the nurse said, she's just eaten, but she's fallen asleep again. And I was like, that's just very unusual. And within about an hour, they decided to do a lumbar puncture on her and hook her up to an IV just in case. And as we were standing in the room, going over potential tests and things that they may still want to do, she had her very first grand mal seizure. And it then turned out 50 days later, after our very long hospital stay, that Zoe has intractable epilepsy and global developmental delays. Basically, this means she's on chronic medication to manage her seizures. And global developmental delays are a catch-all for delays in milestones. She's 9 years old today. And at 6 months old, we were told that she would not sit on her own, not speak, never be able to feed herself. She would be dependent on us for everything for her entire life. And thankfully, my wife and I just refused to believe that. So we've done everything we possibly can for Zoe over the last 9 years. And yes, we've hit roadblocks. COVID was a big one because all of a sudden she couldn't see a physiotherapist, an occupational therapist, or a speech therapist. She was at one stage having between 12 and 24 seizures a day that only her parents could pick up because they affected her breathing. So you'll remember when she didn't breathe on the change table, that was the first time that the neurological pathways had basically cut off her airway. So for the first 3 or 4 years of her life, that's what her seizures looked like. She would slowly turn blue, or her lips would purse, her eyes might flicker, but that was what her seizure looked like, purely because of the fact that the neurological pathways to her arms, legs weren't developed enough for it to fit and to show, as many would know from a television show or a movie. And as parents, that put us on high alert 24/7. To this day, if I hear my child's breathing pattern change, I go into spidey senses and I think there's something that's happening to her. And essentially that's been our lives for the last, since 2016, constantly on high alert, regular blood tests, check in with neurologists, check in with physiotherapist, occupational therapist. In fact, if there's a doctor with an ist at the end of their title, we've seen them, and they have this in our team. So in a nutshell, my unfreaking believable life is looking after a child that needs a lot of attention and care. And I have gained so much because of it. I think people look at us and often say to me, gosh, you're such an inspiration, or what a journey you've been on. And I know in my heart of hearts that any parent would do the same for their child. I don't think I'm doing anything extra. But I think what most parents don't get when they have a child that doesn't have a lot of extra needs is an appreciation for so many other things. And for that, I'm really grateful. And to be able to tell the story in such a way that hopefully other people see what they have and they start to appreciate that, or they look at families that have gone through really difficult health issues and can lean in and say, I'm here, let me sit here and watch your child or family member and you go and sleep for a little bit, can make the world of difference for that particular parent. So in Zoe's case, she's now 9 years old. We've done a lot and we've given her a lot and we continue to do a lot for her. She sits unassisted on her own on the floor. She can crawl to various locations in the house. She's now able to stand upright on her own, holding her head. She squeals and reacts when she recognizes friends and people that she loves. And I can only tell you that in the next 9 years, she may very well be speaking or walking on her own. And I think that's unfreaking believable.
Absolutely.
It is. And I love the
Yeah.
fact that you refuse to accept sort of the dark prognosis that you were given. And I think that faith on your part in what is possible has made all the difference. And it's an amazing, amazing story.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're quite right. I remember vividly standing in the hospital room, and it's a academic hospital where Zoe spent 50 days, which means that you're surrounded by those doctors that are learning and up and coming, and you're also exposed to the various different faculties and areas of medicine being in this space. So it was fantastic to have everybody watching her and looking at her. So from gastronomy to liver to the brain, everybody. But that also meant they didn't speak to us for a good 3 or 4 days whilst they discussed the case without turning to us. The very first day we got to see the neurologist, we were standing in this hospital room, several cots next to one another, and they're metal cots. So the sides of the cots are pulled up. She was 6 months old, so small. And we were sitting between two of these metal cots, really feeling caged in. And the doctor standing at the end of this bed basically was telling us, and in these exact words, Zoe is a plane we cannot fix, and we should not expect much from her. My wife ran out of the room. I had to chase her down to try and calm her down and catch her. But you're 100% correct. It's that phrase that stuck with us for the longest time. And it was almost speaking over her life what she will and will not be able to do before we've given her a chance to make that decision. So we knew all we wanted to do was support and provide whatever stimulation she needs. And I've learned so much about the way that the body and the brain work. I mean, the more I learn, the less I know. And to that extent, just understanding that the more we can give and the more input we can give and the more love and attention we give, eventually it might just tick over. And that tick over happened about when she was about 5. And then we've just seen an upward trajectory from then.
That's amazing. I think doctors don't understand the words that they use can have a profound impact on not only the family, but on the patient as well. I had a doctor when I was 5 years old tell me I'd be in a wheelchair before I was 30. And I have lived my entire life to prove that man wrong. And, they don't think about that. They don't understand the impact that can have. And Zoe's done the same thing. She's proven that doctor wrong every chance she's gotten. And kudos to her for her strength. And kudos to you and your wife for your courage to go through that, because I can't even imagine. My children are 21 and 23. My daughter nearly drowned when she was 3 years old. And, we didn't go through near what you've gone through with Zoe, but we've really appreciated her life more than ever because we came so close to losing it at such a young age. And yeah, I'm blown away by your story. I think it's truly amazing.
It's unfreaking believable.
Indeed.
Well, believe it, because it's true.
You had mentioned when Zoe was first born that she had inhaled fluid. So did that meconium aspiration have anything to do with that?
No, prior to that, we had a scare. So during the pregnancy, there were tests that they wanted to do, which they then did. And if I backtrack from there a little, it was probably around October, maybe September, a good 4 months or so prior to her due date. And we'd gone in for one of those, I don't know, what do they call them, like 4D scans, and to give you a real good idea of what's going on. And how's this for an unfreaking believable story? That doctor had smeared Rue's belly with jelly and had done all the sonar scans. And without even cleaning it up and sitting us upright, she started to launch into all sorts of things that she thinks is going to go wrong with a child. And by the end of that appointment, she'd basically said, you need to tell me, in 2 days' time whether we were aborting or not. And obviously, that sent us into a tailspin 4 months before Zoe was born. So when she was born, doctors and the pediatrician and everybody that was in the room was aware that there might be something, because at that point, we didn't know what that would look like. Nobody was brave enough, we certainly weren't, to do invasive tests before Zoe was born. So her birth was definitely quite tense. And then when she was brought into the world, because she wasn't breathing, immediately the doctors were like, it's got something to do with her brain. But we don't know what yet. Later, it was real. Everybody realized it was just a meconium aspiration and nothing more than that. But obviously, 6 months later, and we realized to what extent the brain hadn't quite caught up when they really started doing MRIs and all that sort of stuff. Then it was quite clear that the reason she struggled during her birth was because she simply wasn't strong enough. She simply couldn't, coordinate enough to help herself out. And so it was an emergency C-section on the day.
I'm sitting here just sort of gobsmacked by the whole thing, and I'm just struck over and over again about just how the dogged determination that your family showed, you, your wife Zoe, just showed toward embracing every bit of life, and the idea that there was something to believe in, to hold on to fight for here. And I think that's just such a beautiful statement about all three of you. I've been very blessed in my own life, but my husband has certainly had some situation where he has cystic fibrosis, and his parents were told, yeah, he probably won't live past 2, and then he won't live past 10, and then he won't live to graduate from high school. He never get married, never have a family, whatever. So I think that doctors often underestimate human will and what is possible.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with that. There's definitely but I also think there's some people that hear the news and go, "Oh, really? Oh, really? I don't think you know what I know." But then there are other people that almost take that news and go, "Well, the doctors have said, so what's the point?" And we constantly reminded ourselves that although the neurologist was making an educated guess, because that's what medicine is, all due respect to any professional in the industry, it's an educated guess based on averages and things that they've seen in textbooks or previous cases. So he may very well have looked at that MRI scan and seen Zoe's brain and gone, I've seen this before and I've seen how this goes. So in all likelihood, this is how it's going to turn out. But he'd never met us before, and he didn't know what sort of tenacity he was dealing with. Rue is a lioness, and I wanted to say a dragon, but that's obviously going to come across as really negative, but that's not what I mean. She is fierce and determined and did absolutely everything for our child in those first 2 to 3 years that she possibly could. And then we started to realize that we need extra help. We need to make sure that we pull in a bigger team. We need to have people that are available and that understand things a bit better than we do. She's on a specialized diet. In fact, we switched her eating plan around 1 year old into a ketogenic diet, which is effectively the oldest form of medication for epilepsy. And basically what that means is you're eating a very high fat diet with regards to ratios, high in fat, lower in proteins, no sugars, very low carb sort of ratios, 4-to-1 essentially. And that then forces the body into ketosis. So instead of burning glucose, which is something that's going to be quite warm and hot in your brain, operates at a higher temperature, glucose would. Ketones operate at a lower temperature, which just protects the brain just that much more. So she's been on a ketogenic diet since the age of about 1. And again, the doctors we were seeing at the time were like, it's not worth your time. I mean, you're going to be working yourself silly. And to their credit, absolutely, it means weighing off every single meal that Zoe has eaten for her entire life. Like, I know the number of grams she takes in a particular ingredient to that extent. So it definitely takes dedication to the cause and understanding that we're working towards something as a long-term goal. But if you don't know that it's out there and it's possible, I think a lot of times you just go, well, I can't because I was told I shouldn't. So the lioness of a wife that I have, being a scientist, we dug and we looked and we searched and we reached out, and we've built a bit of a community, which I'm very, very grateful and thankful for.
You guys are absolutely amazing, the two of you together as a team for Zoe. She is so lucky to have you both. And even if this story if it can just reach one person that is struggling with something similar to, say to themselves, you know what, I don't like what the doctor said either. And, we're tenacious people as well. So I'm getting choked up. This story has just so profoundly affected me. But if it can just help somebody to know, just because the doctor says one thing doesn't mean you have to just accept it, you know?
Yeah.
And you guys are proof with that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that ties in back to the podcast. The question you were asking me earlier is sort of what lent me into that. And yes, radio was a big deal of that and wanting to tell more longer form stories. I'd bought the equipment in 2014, 2015. Zoe was born in 2016. And then lockdown happened 2020, 4 years after she was born. And here we sat with stories to tell and, the equipment to try and do so. And so the podcast has just sort of developed from there, very much inspired by our journey with Zoe. It's called Something Shifted, and, it really has shifted the way we see the world. And now we search for stories that have also helped other people shift their perspectives and pivoted the way they live their lives. But Zoe is she's a very happy child. I think back to that day sitting in the doctor's office with a 4D scan and then basically writing her off before she was even born. And I think she's been able to touch so many people's lives. To see people walk away from their interactions with her is also so heartwarming. I think she knows she's doing really good work with other people. And I also hope in that way, there's a bit of awareness around special needs and disabilities and so forth. When you bring yourself to interact with someone like that, I know there's a lot of fear and uncertainty around things that we don't know. But in that space, I find myself slowly becoming a bit of an advocate and doing some advocacy rather in creating the spaces and making people feel comfortable in themselves to step out and engage with those that maybe don't know as much. So I would encourage anybody that hasn't met or spoken to someone with a disability of any sorts to do so, because trust me, you're going to come away just that much more whole and moved by the experience, I think.
Sean, can you share with our listeners where they could find you?
Sure. I suppose Googling my name is going to be the easiest nowadays. My website is my name, SeanLoots.com or SeanLoots.com. So SeanLoots.com. Otherwise, my podcast is called Something Shifted, and it's available everywhere. So you'll be able to find me through that. And I'd love to hear from people that have heard this and are looking for a little bit of extra. I always like to tell stories and thank people for believing in possibility, because I think that's what the world needs.
Agreed. And Sean, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story and what makes you unfreaking believable. I'd also like to thank my two besties. And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review it on whatever platform you listen on. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Audible.
You can join our Unfreaking Believable Facebook group and follow us on TikTok and Instagram and X. And you can also join us on Patreon for exclusive content and other perks.
Visit our website at www.ufbpodcast.com. And if you have an unfreaking believable story, reach out to us at ufbpodcast@gmail.com because we'd like to hear your story too.
Betsy, why don't you send us out with your quote of the day?
All right, my quote of the day, and I'm gonna sound this out phonetically because it's a difficult name, is Ama H. Vanarachi. And she says, "A father's tears and fears are unseen. His love is unexpressed, but his care and protection remain as a pillar of strength throughout our lives."
How perfect for today.
What a story.
That is absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Well, listeners, thank you again for joining us today and hearing Sean's story. And remember, as you go out into the world today, don't just be awesome.
Be unfreaking believable.
See you all next time.